And let's just start with the headline that of your Rubes letter today. And it's incessantly calling men toxic is a bad way to get their votes.
Yeah.
And you went, I'm not going to go through this, but the next subhead is the media lesson. And you talk about, like, that's what I want to talk to you about, because I think that there's an underground, and I don't know about it, and this is why I wanted to talk to you about it. I think there's like an underground of the Joe Rogans and the Kill Tonys, and I think that that comedy is kind of on the forefront of it, and I'm peripherally aware of it, and I follow comedy, and I want to hear what you have to say about it and what you think is really going on.
Sure. Well, I think it's part of what that is showing is how there's a gap in what like the quote unquote mainstream media is providing, and that like a lot of men, especially young men, feel like left out and it's not for them. And it, you know, it's sort of like this view that a lot of society is becoming like overly feminized, and any sort of masculinity that is mentioned is labeled as toxic. And a lot of dudes are like, well, then I'll just go over here. Like if you give them nothing else, then they wind up with the Jordan Petersons of the world, because what's the aspirational version of masculinity? Who are the positive role models of how a man should be and how they should behave in a way that's not, you know, like Tim Walz seems like a nice guy, but also just kind of came off as like a puppy who was like cheering on, you know, the lady by his side, and Doug Emhoff, and like I think that's not necessarily like sort of an aspirational model for a lot of young men to aspire to. Not that I'm thinking of those guys as not like a good man who, you know,
no,
but like
no
dudes are like, especially young men are like, you know, more in like, what is the Democratic leaning podcast that's about sports and athletics and masculinity in any way? Like it just seems like what happened to the Democrats is they moved into this realm, whereas like any version of masculinity was to be denigrated or to be downplayed or to be criticized, and like, you know, and like, hey, I'm not here to like defend the patriarch or anything, but the thing about elections is you got to get votes. So you can be morally right, you can be ethically right, you can be like you know, say, you know what, men have had it too good for long enough. We don't care about you anymore. Now it's time to emphasize on getting more power for women, and that the Me Too movement was something that was very necessary. And all that can be true, but also, do you want to win?
Right.
Do you want to win national elections or not? And if you do, and you just push away this huge segment of the population, I think you're going to get more results like we saw this week.
Right. And I'm saying myself that I think I didn't realize how men are feeling because I'm not confronted with it. I'm like a woman in Bushwick. I don't see like macho dudes.
Yes.
And I think there is a lot of, and I think men are, you know, men curb their macho. I think there's macho instincts that men around me are curbing. And I think also, I wanted to talk about human nature.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Please do.
53% of white women voted for Trump too.
Yes.
So like, let's also talk about like what men are perceiving as a gap between what women say and then what they maybe really believe or do or act on or are attracted to.
I totally agree. I totally agree with that. And when you look at evolution, first of all, I mean, men because they're stronger. Men can defend tribes and kill animals. And for most of humanity, that is why they've been in charge. We needed them to be in charge. So there's this biological imperative for them to be in charge. And I don't think that I don't think women know that about themselves. That
Sure.
They're not recognizing that.
Yeah, I mean, like also I think, so you want to get it, like, first of all, you have this media ecosystem that's leaving men out. And then I think you also have, there is like a lot of misogyny and anger towards women. You got all these like this incel community and like all sorts of like undertow around that. But I think if you get under that is how much men are hurting right now, that there's like a masculinity crisis in our culture. It's something like Richard Reeves has talked about, Scott Galloway has talked about it a little bit, but how much men are suffering right now. If you look at like rates of suicide, graduation rates, income, depression, across the board. Men are like retreating and suffering and like not doing well. And then on top of that, you have a huge swath of society that's calling them toxic and being like, we don't care what you want or what you think. And when you do that to a bunch of people who are already hurt and suffering, then they get into like a defensive crouch and want to lash out. Like if you don't kind of tell, and also men need to be taught. Dudes, like, we need like a girlfriend to move in with us and say, you really ought to buy a toilet brush.
No, I
know.
know.
You need a loofah. You should have a throw pillow. Why do we throw out that couch? Men need that. They don't figure it out on their own. And I think you can extrapolate that to like a lot of areas of being a man. Like sometimes I know it shouldn't be women's job, but sometimes it is to be like, hey, we see you men, but also like, can we teach you a little bit like, hey, this is also like a good way to be, and as opposed to just like rejecting them or saying that we don't need you at all. And I think that's wrapped up in all this too, is like how much men are like suffering right now and feel unseen. And this election kind of gave them a way to lash out.
Yeah, I don't understand that, and I want you to illuminate that, because I don't understand that men feel hurt and feel left out. I just don't understand.
Well, how about just the data of like they're not accomplishing as much in school, they're dropping out, that they're committing suicide at a higher rate, they're suffering from depression at a much higher rate. Just like there's just data out there of how much men are suffering right now. So there's those empirical.
I totally, I believe that I believe those facts, and I believe that's true. But I think men are, as they are so stereotyped, they're keeping those feelings to themselves. They don't really have the ability or the nature to discuss it. And I want to hear can you illuminate what that feels like? I mean, what that might feel like?
I'm not going to label myself as like an incel or whatever, but I'm trying to like,
educated.
I'm trying to articulate like what I sense and for what I've read and people that I've been around. And you're right, like within the comedy scene, there is definitely, in that whole sort of like podcast milieu, there's some of this energy going on. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's the way women have always felt, on some level of like being unseen or like, like you're not needed here. And like, I just think for young men, what is the path that they're supposed to aspire to? What is the right way to be masculine? What is the right way to be successful? What is the right way to not, just have to like be some virtue signaling, I'm going to take a back seat, the future is female. Kind of like even that phrase, the future is female.
Right.
Think about what that communicates to men.
Yeah.
Like, how about the future is collaborative? How about the future is men and women working together? That we are like a yin and yang that need each other. That we, maybe there's some stuff we're better at and there's some stuff you're better at, and we can teach each other and be like this cohesive whole, as opposed to it's all like, you know what, you had your time, now it's over, get in the corner.
Yeah, I that makes perfect sense to me. So, I mean, maybe women have over-indexed.
I mean,
you're not allowed to say that. That's the problem.
And I don't think it has to be a zero-sum game. I think that's part of the problem too. Is like, well, if women are going to do better, men have to suffer. Because the reality of it is, the more men are suffering, the more it just feeds back on women. You got a bunch of angry, unhappy dudes who like can't get laid and can't get a job. That's bad for everyone. That's bad for society, and also you look at the dating market, like it's also bad for women in that way. This is why part of why so many women are frustrated with dating and feel like they can't find a man, is like men are just in this sort of vortex right now where I think they're confused and not sure how to get out of it or how to behave. Right. And it's a bummer that women have to be part of like helping them out and showing them and teaching them, but also if you don't, it gets worse for everyone.
Well, I don't see that as a bummer. Like when you started talking about that, women helping men, like, how to get throw pills on their couch. So, I mean, I think that's great. I think that's kind of an exchange of services. Yeah. And I don't think women should look at it as like, oh God, the guy can't decorate his apartment, he needs a woman. Maybe like I have this ability that I can share, and maybe he can put a couch together from IKEA or something. I think like recognizing and respecting and honoring the differences are really important.
I'm 100% agree. I think that aligns with something else that's been happening in society, which is like gender doesn't really exist, and that it's anyone can be anything, and we're all, you know, just fluid and on the spectrum, and like I think, and that's fine if that's how you feel for you, but I also think there are some sort of archetypal roles that have existed throughout history of masculine and feminine, manifested through our actual biological forms, and like when you completely discount that, then you start to wind up in tricky territory where people are like, well, I don't know, I kind of feel like as a man, like this is my instinct, or I have all this testosterone, it makes me feel this way about the world, and now I'm being told like that way I feel is wrong. And no one likes being told the way they were born is wrong. The same way like trans or gay people, the way you were born is wrong is like a terrible thing to tell someone like that. That also applies to like straight white dudes, you know, be like the way you were born is wrong and bad and you're toxic. It's like no one likes being told that. No one likes you people are all alike.
No,
there's never been any group of people that's like, oh yeah, that's true. Us people are all like that. No one likes that.
I completely agree. And I also think part of the problem is that men are not allowed to push back.
Yes.
Because which is not true with any other constituency. Like men aren't allowed to say, you know, we're being treated unfairly by women. We're being labeled toxic by women, right?
Well, they can and do, but it's like on Reddit in these forums for these incels, and it's never like sort of articulated in the mainstream media in any way. Like Richard Reeves is like one of the few people I know who's out there saying, he's an academic, he's studied it, he's like, you know, and there's all kinds of like interesting findings there, but he's really, I feel like he's like pushing a rock up a hill to try to get the word out there of how much men are suffering in our society, because it doesn't align with this dominant sort of mainstream view that like the patriarchy has gone too far and men are, you know, awful or whatever else, and we need more female leaders and all that. And you know, I get all that too. And also, by the way, I voted for Kamala. I think Trump's like the greatest con man ever. I'm not here advocating for what happened or encouraging it. What I'm trying to point out to people in the thing that I wrote is that, do you want to win or not? Do you want to win national elections moving forward? Because if the party that you're aligned with does nothing but shove this entire, you know, spectrum of voters aside, it's just going to be like more and more defeats.
I agree, and what I'm also trying to talk about is biology and how like we can't, how you really can't get away from it, because human nature, and I had a quote, which I don't have right now, whatever. It based on facts, I'm telling you, I read some facts in the New York Times, I read facts. And
Jamie, pull this up, hold on, let's check this out.
Yeah, we have the producers, a full set of producers. Anyway, the thing is that masculine hegemony. So we are, you know, men. We are a society. We have survived because men have dominated. It had to be that way, biologically, for humanity to survive. I mean, that was true with the Native Americans just like 150 years ago. And when you look at how long humanity has been on this planet, it's really a very new idea that women should be in charge, and men biologically, I think, need to feel needed by women. They need to feel, am I right?
Yeah, I think technology is a huge part of this too. Men used to go fight wars. They used to dig ditches. They used to build skyscrapers. They used to do like hard, dangerous things. And now, I don't want to say everyone, but for the most part, they're sitting on a laptop or working remote, or like, you know, doing the things that are important in society can be done by either gender. You don't need to be a man. But like what happened when all those things were taken away from men is they kind of lost their purpose. You know, that was a way, that was when you were providing value. And when you take all those things away from men and just make us all do the same thing, well, like kind of what is the purpose of being a man? What you have all this displaced sort of instincts and urges and like sort of biological programming and DNA, and you don't know where to put it. Like you're just like, oh, like I thought I was supposed to go out and like conquer something or protect something or like accomplish something or take a risk. And now it's just like, no, just go and like,
sit over there and
sit on your laptop and type, or just scroll on your phone all day, and like, or play video games, and then that's not filling the hole that these guys are feeling.
Yeah, and I think that I think it's really hot. Come on, ladies, when you see a guy like move shit that you can't move, or get out of the way, I've got this, that's sexy. I mean, I think there's a sexual dynamic.
Well, that's
to
the
it.
other aspect of it, which is, all this talk about how we want men to behave, but then men also see who women are attracted to. And it's not male nurses and male kindergarten teachers and guys who are just sitting on a laptop all day. It's, people, they, like, athletes are doing fine, like MMA fighters are not like, oh man, how do I talk to a girl, like I think there's this sort of, a little bit unspoken, like, biological urges at play here too, whereas like men a lot of times are doing just what they think women are attracted to. And like, you can say you want men to be like woke and virtue signaling and all that, but like, how much are women genuinely attracted to men who behave that way?
Right, I agree, and I think that do you see that in your world? Do you see women being attracted to like the like toxic masculine dudes in your world? Or is that more like just in society in general?
I mean, I don't think toxicity specifically is attractive, but I do think things like, I think tall guys do a better job getting laid than short dudes. Like, like, we could say like, I'm completely open-minded, I think it's fine, you go short king and all that stuff. Also, look around.
Yeah.
Tall dudes are doing fine when it comes to attracting women.
Yeah,
I think it's the white privilege of getting laid.
Yeah.
It's like tall guys who are like, no, I got her because my personality is charming. I'm like, no. I think that's part of it. But there was a little, you were born lucky. Let's also admit that.
Totally. And women have, other things about their genetics too that are, but I do think that, so what I really want to hear about is, I want to hear what are we missing? What am I missing? Like, what was going on? Were you surprised? Did you think Trump was going to win?
I didn't know. I was not surprised, but like, I was just like, who knows? We'll see. I didn't get a good read on it, but like, I'm certainly not shocked.
Do you listen to Rogan, or in the comedy world, are you more exposed to, like, I'm assuming
I mean, I know Theo, I know Tony, I know
Oh,
Rogan, and like, not well, like these are all people I've like
you've
hung
been
out
in
with,
rooms
they've been in a room with or something, but like, I think, but not at all a surprise. Like, so this is something everyone in comedy knows how much more powerful that scene is than, say, like The Tonight Show. Like,
really?
So yeah,
I don't know that.
I think most people, but everyone in comedy knew this years ago. I think America just realized this week something that people in comedy have known for years, which is going on Colbert or Fallon. You'd have to do that like 25 times to equal one appearance on Rogan. Like, you just look at the YouTube views. So like, the power that Theo has or Rogan has when someone goes on there to reach people, and also people who aren't engaging anywhere else with politics or anything else. You're reaching these guys, and I'm not saying this is what moved the needle on the election, but you can't be surprised that like the people who are going to like YouTube and podcasts and to some degree social media are like moving the needle more than those who are just fighting the last war of like, well, I went on 60 Minutes. It's like, I don't know, does 60 Minutes really matter anymore? Trump didn't do it and went on Theo instead, and probably reached more people than she did by going on 60 Minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I suspected that, but I didn't realize it the way that I do right now.
Well, we knew it as comedians through ticket sales. So you just saw people like Andrew Schultz or other people, Tim Dillon, like gain an audience online through podcasting and instantly go from like, working at clubs to like selling out theaters to now doing arenas. And you just saw this ascent in a way that's like, oh, everyone who thought you were supposed to get on the Tonight Show or work through the industry or have gatekeepers approve you, that's fighting the last war. That's what mattered 10 years ago or 20 years ago. That's not where media is right now. That's not where the actual eyeballs are. And like, we have that scoreboard of like butts and seats.
Sure.
That's what every comedian is like. Are you putting butts in seats or not?
How much of their audience is men? Is it like 90 or is it 70? Is it 70-30 women, or what do you think?
I would say more 70-30 than 90.
Uh-huh. And what
I think it's
kind
also, it's like, you know, Rogan is talking about like MMA stuff a lot and things like that. And like that's probably not going to appeal to that many women.
mixed martial arts guys?
Yeah.
But what's your...
Theo might appeal to ladies more though, because he's like just sort of like more like Southern, like down home guy, good storyteller sort of vibe. So and also like like most of these like it gets called like the manosphere or the Rogan sphere or something like that, as if it's like some pejorative. Like I don't think any of these guys are bad people. Like I know, like I don't think they like. I think the danger is when we lose all actual journalism and reporting and challenging questions and holding powerful people to account, and instead just like, just come on, I just want to chat and I'm just asking questions and I'm not going to challenge you at all. That's fine if it's part of a larger media ecosystem, but if that's all that exists and we lose the people who are actually challenging those who are in power, that's dangerous.
Well, Rogan challenged Trump, no?
A little bit, about the rigged election, for sure.
Yeah, he pushed back more than other, more than Fox.
Yeah, and he also had him for 3 hours, that's a different way to like expose someone in its own sense. Like it's easy to do a soundbite or two. You got someone for 3 hours, like it's tough to fake for that long.
Can you sort of outline what the manosphere, what Rogan is like for the listeners, because you're going to do a better job of explaining.
Well, he's like a specific flavor. Like to me, what's interesting is like entertainment wise, we were always taught, and I think still are, you have to be one specific thing and one specific. You're for this, and he's got like he loves comedy, he loves mixed martial arts, loves conspiracy theories. Loves like, every time it's just a bunch of like random stuff coming at you. It's like Viking documentaries and then like flat earth theory and then politics and then business and science. Talks to a lot of like professors and academics too. Oh. So it's him following his own personal, like, who do I want to talk to? Who do I want to have a conversation with for 3 hours? And I think, it's just, really one of those things of like, he's just gotten so popular with like 10 million people. Like it's like, and I think that's a challenge when you go from like sort of a small thing to a massive thing like that, because you're like, well, the way I got successful is by what I was doing in this intimate kind of smaller environment. So I'm going to keep doing that. I'm not going to change. I'm going to be authentic to who I am and what got me here and all that. But on the flip side of that is like, but when you have like 15, 20 million people listening to you, isn't that a different sort of responsibility? Mm-hmm. Now, do you have more responsibility to have like live fact checking to, sort of, you can do like, I'm just asking questions is one thing when you've got, 10,000 listeners. It's another thing when you got 20 million listeners.
So are you saying that he espouses non-truths? Does he talk
He's really into conspiracy theories, and I think he's like, it would make a lot of, I'm just saying, if you were going to do this, if the deep state did want to do this, isn't this how they would do it? Mm-hmm. And it's like, it is entertaining, it's just sort of like this middle ground of like, I'm just asking questions, or isn't this interesting to think about? It's like, well, we can't prove it, but what can we prove? And I think, again, I go back to, I think that's fine in its own like little arena, but like when the rest of the media ecosystem is crumbling and journalism is falling apart and there is no real reporting anymore and no one can agree on truth, that's when I think it gets dangerous. So we put this responsibility on him that's really probably part of this larger problem, which is like the downfall of journalism and the what the mainstream media has gone through, and what Jeff Bezos is doing at the Post and things like that. It's sort of like we wind up attacking him for something that like, but where's the counterbalance? Give me someone who's doing real reporting. As a society, do we even want real reporting? Do we want actual journalism? Do we want the truth? Or are we more entertained by like, hey, that's an amusing theory. I never thought about that.
That's interesting. I didn't realize that he was espousing those kinds of theories, because I've been talking about it this week, that conspiracy theories really, they really tie into human nature. I think humans love conspiracy theories because they feel like they're on the inside, that they know the real truth. And I think it really makes the ego feel good, because I know more than everybody. They can say to themselves, I know everything that's going on. And then I think there's a real drive in human nature to embrace conspiracy theories.
Yeah, I mean, I had a joke about it that like conspiracy theories are astrology for dudes.
Yeah.
You know, it's just sort of like it's about, and I'm actually like I'm fascinated by astrology too, and why people believe it so much. And a lot of it, they say, experts say, comes down to like an internal versus external locus of control. The more you feel helpless about your own life, the more you feel like you lack agency, the more you seek out some like higher power, some unseen force is controlling the universe, and sort of like that provides sort of answers as opposed to having to examine your own role in things. And then I think there's also just I'm a big believer in chaos theory and Occam's razor. I think
that's like over my head.
Well, chaos theory, there's just random crap happening all the time in the
Yeah.
universe for no reason. We can't control it or understand it's just happening. And then Occam's razor is just whatever's the simplest explanation is probably the right one. And sometimes the level of complexity around these conspiracy theories is where you lose me. I'm like, hey, have you been to like the DMV or the post office? Like the government can't even do that properly. How do you think they're doing some deep state operation with like thousands of people keeping a secret and getting away with it? That just doesn't make sense to me. I like the more people you think are involved in a conspiracy theory, the less likely I am to believe it.
Yes.
I think one person, maybe two, can
Yeah.
conspire. If you got 1,000 people, I don't believe they're all keeping that a secret.
See, I think that conspiracy theories are just another side of religion. I think that religion has really declined. The interest in religion has declined, and I think that's why people are interested in conspiracy theories.
I agree with that. Yeah, I think, well, you could argue religion's a conspiracy theory.
Absolutely. It is a conspiracy theory.
Yeah. Well, like, again, I go back to unseen powers controlling the universe, you know?
And the feeling of knowing and being in control.
Yeah, or if the feeling that you're out of control is okay.
Yeah, because somebody's got the whole thing.
It's God's plan.
Yeah, and I think if you go back to like cavemen, like dealing with, you know, the elements, weather and stuff like that, they all believed that there were, you know, gods taking care of all this and that they had no control over it, because I think the drive to have control over our lives is so strong that it has to be satisfied with something. And I think like religions too, I don't think religion seems, I think we're too far as a culture, like there's no hip hop in religion. Well, I mean, there is.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would go towards, as religion declines, you don't get rid of religion, you make a new one. And what we've turned into religion is capitalism and consumerism.
Yes.
And acquiring stuff.
Yes.
And that we've made, and technology, and we've made that our new God.
Right.
And unsurprisingly, it's not working out great. we turned those things into our new God, and then we're like, why am I so lonely and anxious and depressed and sad? Like, what happened? It's like, I don't know, you're worshiping some false idols.
Yeah, go buy something.
Or, you know, like at least organized religion, for all its faults, you know, has this thousands of years of sort of like providing meaning and purpose to people on some, I'm a believer that anything that sticks around and sustains for thousands of years is providing value in some way.
Oh yes, I think religion does provide value. I think like it's a guide. It's a guide to ethics and morals,
Sure.
if nothing else. And I'm a big believer in ethics and morals.
Yeah, I'm a Joseph Campbell fan of like the power of myth, and like instead of getting hung up on like did this really happen, or like the bad stuff, like what are these myths providing to people, and why have they kept being generated for over hundreds or thousands of years? Like what ancient wisdom is possessed in these, you know, the things that are the original memes.
Right. Yeah, they are. They're memes. And I also think that men have a big drive to protect their families, and or, you know, whatever that is to them. And I think that has been subverted too. I think that there's no place for that to go, and I think that that's part of why they are interested in Trump and all this other stuff.
And MMA stuff. Yeah, I think there's something to that for sure.
And I think there's that, like,
also how little that image is presented in the media elsewhere anymore. Like that,
Yes.
you're like Liam Neeson and Taken or whatever. Like that doesn't seem to be like where the action heroes of today. Where like, you know, my dad loved like Sean Connery and
Yeah.
Steve McQueen and Clint Eastwood, and like you had those, like, who are the action heroes of today that like boys can look up to and be like, I want to be a man like that. It's like, I don't know, like The Rock maybe, but he doesn't. I don't know who it is.
No.
We don't even have that strain in our culture anymore. Yet there probably is some powerful biological urge or instinct for men to see other men like that, and that's been taken away from them in a way that they're like, oh, no wonder they're gonna. Then they seek out the Jordan Peterson or the Donald Trump or some version of masculinity, Tucker Carlson being like, daddy needs to come home and spank you, or whatever the hell that was. Like, I'm like, why is this happening? And they're like, oh, it's this like just, you know, lost sea of men who want their daddy, you know, it's not being given to them anywhere else. And some women too, like I said, 53% of white women voted for Trump too. So it's like this, I see this massive like daddy complex going on of like, you know, okay, we've attacked the patriarchy so much that we're like, okay, but also we probably have some biological urge towards being aligned with the patriarchy, and if that's not, you know, being represented anywhere else, then you get like the messed up versions of it start becoming more attractive.
Right, and what, like something that you mentioned earlier about men and women working together, not one dominating the other. And I think that we don't even, do we even have that conversation?
Yeah, or men being like, here's what I love about femininity, and women being like, here's what I love about masculinity. I think masculinity is great. I think feminine, I like, where's that conversation? Why, like this idea that it's like a zero-sum battle. Where anything that's good for one is bad for the other, I think is like a false dichotomy where it's like, oh no, we need each other. Like how can we raise each other up?
Totally. And I think a lot of it has to do with ego too, like people wanting to feel like important. And I think, I mean, it's obvious with men, you know, we know about that, but I think women have it too. I think women are really defensive about having power.
What do you mean?
I think that women complain, like they're looking to have power because they want to show men, like they may want to show like their partners. Sometimes I feel like this. Look, I know I'm doing it. It's mine. I'm in charge here. You don't know anything. And I think that I think sometimes, and it's not just me, but sometimes I think I feel defensive because I'm a woman and I'm afraid that the guy's gonna think that he can do it better or he needs to do it. And, you know, I'm in charge. I can be in charge.
Sure.
But if you're really secure, you just are in charge.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that, like, women doing that. I mean, Kamala handled it a little better by not going like, you know, hey, I'm a woman, you gotta vote for me. But she was, you know, still a woman. Yeah,
I mean, I think there's truth in that too. I think, I don't know, just maybe it's a tangent, but like another subset of this masculinity, you know, manosphere, whatever you want to call it, is this obsession with like being alpha. Alpha males, and you don't want to be a beta. You don't want to be a cuck. You don't
that's a new word.
You don't want to be a simp.
Right.
I love that we've turned being sympathetic into an insult. Like, to me, that's a good sign of where we're at in the society. Like, oh, you're sympathetic? What a loser, you know? But then what's fascinating to me, all these guys are obsessed with being an alpha, and then they turn around and just kiss the ass of this guy who's so clearly like a con man, and they're just like wearing a shirt with his face on it and being like, oh, yes, daddy, you have the biggest crowd size of all. I'm like, what kind of alpha does this? Like, what kind of, your version of being an alpha seems a lot like being like a little bitch, if I'm being honest.
No,
you know,
totally.
like you're just kissing this guy's ass while you're just like, he tells you to lie and you lie. He makes up some crazy shit. You got to go up on the morning show and defend it, and you got to like wear his merch. I'm just like, what kind of alpha behavior is this? You know, like the real the closest we've seen to like an alpha behavior in the Republican Party is Liz Cheney.
Totally.
She's the only alpha that I've seen who's
right.
like, go ahead, primary me. I don't care. I'm not telling you that the emperor's clothes are beautiful. I'm not gonna do it. You can go up there and lie for that, dude. I'll show you what it's like to be a real man. I'm out of here.
Yeah, I mean, look at J.D. Vance. That's a cock.
He's a chameleon, that guy.
Yeah,
He's slippery.
I better watch what I say. I'm gonna have hate mail.
What? I mean, he is, and he's, well, you see how attractive power is. I must get, like, for the ones who are like Musk or him who get something out of it, it's like, okay, at least I get the transactional nature of this. The fanboys and the fandom and the ones who are just like think that they're more macho because they're supporting this bullshit. I'm like, oh, honey, no, you're the one being manipulated.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think a lot of what's going on what's behind all this is that women are starting to get more, or, society is changing. Women are having more power.
Yep.
A lot of that's a good thing. But I think that we have, like you say, made it a zero-sum game. And I think a lot of women want men to be masculine, but they don't know that about themselves. And I think there's just a lot, as a pretend psychotherapist, I'm just gonna say, society, there's a lot. I think a lot of what's going on is really a fight between the men and women, and the tension between men and women and biology, and we aren't dealing with it directly.
Yeah, and I would add in technology and what technology has done to us, where we're all sort of living in our own algorithmic bubble where we're told we're always right and our ego is always stroked, and anyone who we disagree with we get to dunk on and all that, and then how difficult that makes it to go out and interact in the real world. And
Yes.
to have to compromise, to have to realize oh, not everyone agrees with you. Can you persuade someone as opposed to dunk on them? Can you is everything really a red flag? Is everything that you're ick? I'm like, okay, but that just is do you always get what you want? Is life one of those preferences screen where you get a bunch of check boxes and you get to check off what you want and don't want? And I feel like that's how a lot of people start to view their lives, because so much of our technology feeds us that. But then, like human beings, there are no check boxes. You don't get to just choose what you want or what you don't want. It comes as this, people come as a holistic package. And then you gotta be willing to negotiate and bend and compromise and flex and figure out if there's hooks and loops that can work together in a way that isn't always getting what you want.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And another part about technology is that we have stopped actually interacting face to face. If people don't talk in public, they don't make
eye contact.
Yeah, they don't talk in classrooms. They don't talk whenever there's downtime.
Yeah.
We don't talk, and I think that's really unnatural. I think technology has taken over.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to go back to the gender stuff, even a man approaching a woman, which I think is actually something most women would appreciate and like and crave and are complaining about. It never happens anymore. And then I think you've got men on the other side being like, hey, I don't want to get me too'd. I don't want sexual harassment. I don't want HR. I don't want to offend her. Or she's on her phone. I don't want to bother her. Even that is something that we've lost from society in a way that there was something healthy about a dude can go up, say I'm busy right now, or I'm not interested. And you could have that back and forth without it being assault or violence or harassment, or so we didn't have to heighten everything to this trauma level. There could be some sort of interaction and dance between us that was okay and acceptable, even if it wasn't what you wanted at exactly that moment. And when we lose that, then everyone sort of just goes into their corners and starts to view each other as the enemy on some level.
Totally. And I mean, it's not just in dating, it's on every level. It's like at the supermarket, we have self-checkouts. Yeah. We order things from Amazon, where we don't go to the bank. We're just not interacting with other people.
Or I work out of coffee shops a lot, just posted up on a laptop, and I'm always blown away the amount of people who are taking a Zoom call in a coffee shop.
Wow.
Surrounded by other people. And I'm just I go back to ego on that. It's what these devices and machines make us do is think we're the only person in the world.
Right.
I get it. You're at home on a Zoom call. This is what you do. You're in a there's a social contract. You're around other human beings right now, and you're like just doing the Zoom call in public with other people right next to you. I like the ego of it kind of blows me away, that you're like, you didn't even stop to consider how are other people around you feeling about this. Like, you're the only person in the universe. Like, that's what these devices are doing to us all the time. You're the only person in the universe.
Totally.
Here's the content you want. Here's the opinions you agree with. You. And like the first thing you learn in like, you know, Zen or psychedelics is like ego loss. It ain't about you.
Yeah.
You want to know the meaning of life? This was my revelation on my last mushroom trip. You know what the meaning of life is? It's not about you. It's not about you.
Agree.
Get outside of yourself. You're part of a larger system. It's about who you're connected to, the people around you, everything that you're a part of that's not you. And if you can connect to that, that's the path towards, you know, enlightenment or whatever word you want to use, as opposed to these devices, which is just feeding us, no, you. It's a poison.
Well, and it does create loneliness and isolation.
And we're like, why am I so sad? Why am I anxious? Why am I depressed? I'm getting what I want all the time. How is that not working out for me?
Totally. You know, I think back a lot to this time. I went to India, I don't know, like 20 years ago or whatever, but I did notice at that time, I don't know what it's like now, like people were really poor, you know, or like in a, you know, undeveloped nation, people didn't have anything, but they were really happy. And I think that they really see, like, you can't even compliment somebody there, they get embarrassed. And I think that, I'm exaggerating. And the thing is, what I got from the culture that I thought was really beautiful was that they really see themselves as a fabric of society.
Yeah. Much more community-oriented, family-oriented, respecting your elders.
Yeah.
All sorts of things that are like foreign to Americans, I think.
And they really live in this really interconnected way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about the individual. And I think that is really the healthiest way for humans to be.
Yeah, well, let me push back gently. I mean, overall, I agree with you. But maybe there's a way to sort of bring a thread through all of this together of like that sort of community. I would label this as more of like an Eastern, you know, approach to respecting your elders, community, not about individual ego. You know, the group is more important than the individual, and that there is something beautiful and healthy about that. But then you have a more Western, individualistic, you know, maybe more ego-based status, accomplishments sort of thing, and look at all the innovation and inventions that have come out of that, and like sort of the creativity that breeds, and there are wonderful things about that. And so maybe again we go back to like, instead of just having one way being the right way or pitting these things as enemies, how can we like go back and forth between them? How do we have a duality with East and West, with yin and yang, with men and women, as opposed to being like, oh, there's one way that's the right way and everyone should do it that way, being like, oh, we've accepted fluidity in every other area of our lives. Why can't we accept it in like terms of like philosophy or politics or, you know, sort of how we interact with each other? That like sometimes that way is better and sometimes this way is better, or just appreciate the differences between, like, yeah, you know what, you're really killing it in this area and accomplishing a lot because you are the way you are, but also we're over here doing great in these areas because of the way we are, and maybe we can fill in gaps for each other.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that we're saying the same thing in that the result of the election has a lot to do with how out of balance our society is, and how a large part what we're focused on is how out of balance women are, being masculine, being feminine, and how out of balance we are about technology and stuff. And I think that I think we've got to, you know, I think now's the time to really think about doing better and really think about our defensiveness, you know, like, you know, like looking at, I like masculine men. What do I like about masculinity?
Well, on both sides also, it's people kind of acting out of like trauma or fear, or, you know, it's negative emotions are driving it.
Right.
You know, and like, whatever we can do to focus on a more aspirational, like sort of view of, instead of like what are the red flags, how are men bad, or what's toxic, or whatever the incels are complaining about with like I don't get the sex I deserve, or what, like, on all sides. Yeah, it's coming from this place of like, what is that? Like that's you base, it's like fear and negativity sort of like rising to the surface in a way that like, can we examine that and pivot to something that's a little like, how do we get to some sea level on it, instead of like, if you're living your life based on past trauma, you're probably going to perpetuate some negative cycles.
Yeah, and we all have some of that. And I think a lot of it is like how we've all gotten siloed, like how we have no idea, like we were talking about like the Joe Rogan guys and all that stuff. So do you see any way forward? Do you see like what's going on in comedy with the media, that part of the media? Like, are we ever gonna like have more of one thing that we're all gonna be tuned into? Like, how are we going to resolve that?
I think those days might be gone. I do think when everyone was watching Johnny Carson and Walter Cronkite and Seinfeld, like there was some agreement as a society that we had. I understand a lot of people were not represented and there was all kinds of negative aspects to that too, but at least we could agree on some sort of shared reality. And the fact now is, via technology, we're all just getting our own little like bubble that's just for us. And what that does is like, it slowly is killing off the idea of a society, of like us all sharing something together. Like, and to go back to the power of myth, like America is a myth. Like the fact that we're all dumping on it all the time, I'm like, can everyone stop and realize there's a reason why all these people from around the world are dying to get here? Like, to me, it's like it's like this reverse sort of ethnocentrism of like, you think this is some uniquely awful place. Like, no, this is still one of, if not the best countries in the world. There's a reason everyone, or so many people, is trying to get here. Like, appreciate it, love it, be thankful for it, express gratitude for it, instead of constantly just dumping on this place like it's some sort of hellhole. It's like, no, we got it pretty good. We're still like the luckiest people that have ever lived. And we're in the safest, luckiest place. Where else would you have wanted to go in the past where you think your life would be better than it is right now here in America? And having some sense of like appreciation, because that seems to be evaporating too.
I agree. Like, I was in Togo, and if you have a Togo passport, you can't really travel to very many countries. We take so much bullshit for granted.
Yeah.
So I don't mean to end on a negative note, but here's what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about that the way we are as a society now, and because of the Trump apocalypse, that the environment is really suffering, and it's going to suffer worse, and the threat of nuclear war seems a lot more possible. And I'm kind of wondering if society is going to get their shit together before we become extinct. I don't know. 4 years.
I get where you're coming from. My best hope for it is psychedelics.
Okay.
I think it's the closest I've found in my life to being the antidote to technology and all this other stuff that's happening is psychedelic. Like, for me, it's been mushrooms and ayahuasca. Small amounts of LSD, but like just in a way that makes people realize like, what the hell are we doing? Yeah. Like, we have to love the planet. We have to love each other. We're all connected. Every time we damage that thing, we're damaging ourselves, and to have some awareness of that. And so I'm not saying it's going to fix it, but to me, that's where at least some amount of hopefulness resides.
I think putting LSD in the water supply is a great idea. Thank you for that.
We've got a solution.
Thank you for that.
Well, RFK is going to take the fluoride out, so maybe we replace it with LSD and problem solved.
I'm with you 100%. So anyway, thanks so much. Say again how we can follow you and all that shit.
MattRubyComedy.com, YouTube.com/MattRuby. I got a new special coming out in a month called Bolo that's going to be really good, so look for that. And then the best way to stay up to date is via my newsletters, and you get that at mattruby.substack.com. And then I'm on Instagram, MattRubyComedy, and TikTok, MattRubyComedy, and I feel like I said everything as far as plugs, but thank you for this conversation. I appreciate it.
No, thank you. And